What happened when my neighbor's son started leaving drawings on my doorstep every morning, each one showing a different way I was going to die? And then one morning, the drawings showed him standing over my body, smiling. It started with the drawings. At first, I thought it was some kind of innocent mistake, a kid being weird, leaving random doodles around the neighborhood. But by the fourth one, I stopped pretending it was harmless. The first drawing showed a house on fire. My house. You could tell by the way the porch was drawn, the crooked railing, the dented mailbox. It was uncanny, right down to the flowers that hadn't bloomed since last summer. The second showed a man, me, lying in the street, head bleeding, a car halfway over the curb. The third one was stranger. It was my bedroom, me in bed, and above me a dark figure standing near the window, holding something that looked like a hammer. I would have thrown it all away, called it a bad prank, if not for the fourth one. The fourth one showed the same thing, the same room, but this time I was awake, and I was looking directly at the figure, and written in shaky, childish handwriting at the bottom. Tomorrow. The drawings always came around 7 a.m. I knew because I started waiting by the window. My neighbor's son, Caleb, was 9. Small, quiet, pale kid, the kind who didn't talk much in class and drew on everything he could reach. He'd been strange since his dad died the year before, but no one ever said anything. He'd leave his house, cross the lawn barefoot, and slip an envelope under my door. Then he'd stand there for a few seconds, looking up like he was waiting for someone to wave. The first morning I caught him doing it. I opened the door too fast. He froze. "Caleb," I said. "What's this?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me, those pale blue eyes, wide and unfocused, then turned and ran back to his house without saying a word. The envelope was warm in my hand, like he'd been holding it too long. Inside was the drawing of my house on fire. That afternoon, I tried talking to his mom, Claire. She looked exhausted, hollow cheeks, dark circles, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep. "I think Caleb's been leaving these," I said, showing her the papers. She stared at them for a long time, face completely blank. Then she said something that didn't make sense. "He's not supposed to draw anymore." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Her eyes flicked toward the living room, where Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at a blank sheet of paper. "The therapist said the drawings are how it talks to him," she whispered. "It's how it got in." My mouth went dry. "It?" She didn't answer. She just shook her head. "Please don't encourage him," she said quietly. "And if he brings you another, don't look at it." That night, I couldn't sleep. The drawings were still on the kitchen counter, and every time I glanced at them, I could swear the shadows looked different than before, the black crayon darker, the shapes sharper. Around 2 a.m., I got up for water and saw something out the window. Caleb, standing in the middle of my yard, barefoot, wearing pajamas, staring at my house. He was holding a flashlight, but he wasn't pointing it at anything. He was shining it at his own face, the beam cutting harsh shadows across his features. When the light flickered, I could have sworn his eyes weren't blue anymore, they were black. I ran outside, calling his name. He didn't move. "Caleb." "Go home, buddy. Your mom's gonna freak out." He just stared at me. Then slowly he smiled, wide and wrong, like a puppet learning the expression for the first time. He raised his hand, and in it, he was holding another envelope. He dropped it at my feet. "This one's the last," he said. His voice didn't sound like his, and before I could say anything, the flashlight went out. When it came back on, he was gone. I opened the envelope right there under the porch light. This one was different. It wasn't drawn in crayon. It was drawn in ink. The lines were precise, deliberate, almost too steady for a 9-year-old. It showed me lying on the floor in my living room, my throat cut open, my eyes wide, and above me, holding a knife, was Caleb. But there was one more thing written in the bottom corner, small enough I almost missed it. It made me do it. I dropped the page like it burned. My chest felt tight, my breath short. I stumbled back inside, locked every door, shut the blinds. My heart wouldn't stop racing. I tried calling. Claire, no answer, tried. Again, nothing. The clock on the wall said 2:47 a.m. That's when I heard it, the sound of paper sliding under my front. Door slow, deliberate, then silence. I stood frozen, staring at the floor. Another envelope. This one wasn't white like the others. It was red, and written across the front, in black marker, were 3 words. "Look behind you." I turned, and in the reflection of the window, I saw a shape. Small, still, standing in the doorway to my living room, smiling, holding something in his hand that glinted in the dark. For a moment, I couldn't move. The world around me seemed to slow down. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, it all faded until the only sound left was my heartbeat. Caleb stood motionless in the doorway, the dim porch light behind him outlining his small frame. The glint in his hand caught the light again, a knife, a kitchen knife. My kitchen knife, Caleb, I said slowly, keeping my voice calm. Where's your mom? He tilted his head just slightly. The motion was smooth, too smooth. Sleeping. He said in a voice that wasn't his own. It was deeper, wrong, like something imitating. Speech for the first time and getting it almost right. She can't hear me anymore. Swallowed hard. Okay, I said carefully. Let's put the knife down, all right? You don't want to hurt anyone. He blinked. Once, twice. Then he smiled. I don't hurt anyone, he said. It does. My throat tightened. What does, Caleb? He took one step forward, dragging the tip of the knife lightly along the wall as he did.
The sound made my skin crawl. The thing that draws, he whispered. I took a slow step backward. The living room light flickered once, then twice, then went out completely.
The house was plunged into darkness, except for the faint blue glow from the street outside. And that's when I heard the whispering. Not from him, from behind him. It sounded like hundreds of voices, all speaking at once, just low enough that I couldn't make out the words. I could see movement in the dark behind Caleb. Something shifting, pulsing like the air itself was breathing. He turned slightly, listening, then looked back at me. It says it likes you. My knees went weak. I could barely keep my balance, Caleb, I said, trying to sound calm. I'm going to call your mom, okay? He shook his head slowly. You can't. Why not? He smiled wider. She's already part of it. The knife slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. I didn't move. He stepped back, arms going limp at his sides, head dropping forward. And then, from the shadows behind him, something long and pale reached out. It was a hand, or at least it looked like one, but stretched too far. The fingers jointed wrong, bending backward as they gripped Caleb's shoulders. His head snapped up. Eyes wide, mouth open, but no sound came out. The thing stepped closer, and I saw it properly for the first time. It wasn't solid, more like charcoal smoke in the shape of a person. Its face flickered constantly, shifting between dozens of different expressions. Some familiar, some impossibly distorted, and then it spoke, not with a voice, but with many, all layered together, old and young, male and female. He draws what we show him. He delivers what we decide. Now it's your turn. I stumbled backwards, slamming into the kitchen counter. The thing tilted its head, studying me, as the voices inside it whispered faster and faster, overlapping until the words blended together into one endless rhythmic murmur. Behind it, Caleb's body went still. His eyes were rolled back, white and unseeing. The thing stepped forward again, its shape beginning to stretch and thin until it towered nearly to the ceiling. Its hands brushed the floor, the fingers leaving streaks of ink-like blackness that hissed and sank into the wood. I grabbed the only weapon I could find, the frying pan on the stove, and, swung with everything I had. It went right through it, like smoke. The thing didn't even flinch, but Caleb did. He gasped, sharp and sudden, collapsing to his knees. The shadow flinched backwards slightly. Like it had been pulled with him, I realized it was tethered, and I grabbed Caleb by the shoulders, shaking him. Wake up! Caleb, listen to me! His head lolled forward. It's not done, he whispered. Then tell me how to stop it. You can't stop it, he said, eyes fluttering open. But you can change it. How? He looked up at me. Draw something else. I froze. What do you mean? He lifted a trembling hand and pointed at the envelope on the floor. The red one. It uses drawings to make things real. If you change the picture, you change the ending. I dropped to my knees, tore open the envelope, and grabbed the paper inside. It still showed me, dead on the floor, Caleb above me, smiling, but the ink wasn't dry. It was moving. The lines of my body shifted, twitched, and slowly, the eyes in the drawing opened. No, I whispered. I ran to the counter, grabbed a pen, and started scribbling over it, hard. The paper writhed under my hand like it was alive, the ink smearing into black streaks as I drew. The air grew colder, the lights flickered, and that whispering voice screamed, not through sound, but through my head. You can't rewrite death, but I kept going over and over. I drew the same thing, me standing, not lying down. Me alive. The shadow shrieked, the kind of noise that doesn't belong in this world, and the house shook. I looked up just in time to see it splitting apart, tearing down the middle like paper in a storm. When it was over, I was on the floor. The drawing lay in front of me. The scene had changed. Now, it showed Caleb and me standing side by side. The black shape gone, the words written at the bottom, "Thank you." I turned toward Caleb. He was lying unconscious near the wall, breathing shallow but steady. The shadows in the room were gone. For the first time in days, the air felt light again. By morning, the police were there. I told them Caleb had a night terror, that he'd come to my house confused and panicked. They believed me, or pretended to. Claire didn't. She came by that evening, eyes red, holding a half-burned notebook. "He started drawing again," she said quietly. "But this time, the pages draw themselves." She handed me one of them, a sketch of me, sitting at my desk, writing this story, and above me in the window, a black shape, smiling. The first time the window whispered, I thought I was dreaming. It was barely audible, like wind pressing against the glass, except the words were too clear to ignore. Soft, slow, careful. Draw it again. My eyes snapped open. The clock read 3:12 a.m. I sat up fast, staring at the window. The night outside was too still, the dark too thick. It felt like it wasn't a view anymore, just black paint stretched over a frame. I whispered to myself, "You're hearing things." Then something on the glass moved. Not outside. Inside. A fingertip pressed into the condensation on the window pane, dragging a line. Then another, and another. When it finished, I realized it had drawn a face, my face, and underneath it, 3 words written backwards so I could read them from where I sat. Draw it again. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By sunrise, the face on the window had vanished, but the message remained faintly visible like a scar under skin. I went next door to check on Caleb. Claire answered the door looking even worse than before, hair tangled, eyes sunken, hands trembling. "He's not eating," she said before I could ask anything. "He just sits there, drawing." She gestured toward the living room. The floor was covered in sheets of paper, hundreds of them, all in black crayon. Everyone showed the same thing, the red envelope, and me opening it. "I burned the first batch," she said. "They came back the next morning." "He doesn't even remember drawing them." I stepped closer, crouching down to look at one. It wasn't just a drawing, it moved, faintly like a flickering animation. The picture of me shifted from standing to falling, the knife glinting, the red line across my throat deepening frame by frame. I dropped it. "It wants you," Claire whispered. "It's done with him. You rewrote it. You changed the story." She looked up at me, her voice breaking. "Now it wants the author." I left without another word. When I got home, the smell of burnt paper hit me immediately. My living room floor was covered in ashes, and sitting in the middle of it, untouched, was another red envelope. I didn't want to open it, but I did. Inside wasn't a drawing this time. It was a single Polaroid photo of me, taken from outside my window, while I was asleep. In the background, by the curtains, stood that same black shape, one hand pressed against the glass. I called the police. They came, took the photo, looked around, asked me the usual questions. "Any enemies? Anyone stalking you?" "No." They checked my locks, windows, cameras. Nothing. When they left, one of them, a young officer with tired eyes, pulled me aside. "You said this kid draws things that come true?" I hesitated. "Sometimes." He exhaled slowly, rubbed his neck. "You're not the first person to say that name," he said quietly. "There have been others. A few streets over. Same story. Drawings, predictions. Always ends the same way." My mouth went dry. "How's that?" "The artist disappears." That night, I tore through every notebook, sketch, and scrap of paper in my house. Nothing, until I checked the drawer beneath my bed. Inside was a notebook I'd never seen before. Black leather, small, no title. My name was written. On the first page, the handwriting wasn't mine. The Drawing Book of Reed Taylor. And inside were drawings. My drawings, scenes from the last few weeks. Me opening the first envelope. Me, standing in the kitchen with the red one. Me watching Caleb in the yard. But on the last page, a drawing I hadn't lived yet. Me sitting at my desk, pen in hand, writing this. Behind me, the window was open, and through it, 2 pale hands were reaching in. I slammed the book shut. Every sound in the house stopped, even the hum of the refrigerator. The ticking clock, gone. And then, faintly, The scratching started, not from the walls, from inside the desk drawer. Slow, dragging strokes of a pencil. I opened it, hands shaking. A single piece of paper lay inside. Fresh, white, and drawn in perfect. Confident lines, a door, my front door, and me, standing in front of it, knocking. Before I could move, there was a knock, 3 times. Slow, steady, exactly like in the drawing. I froze, staring at the door. The peephole was black, someone covering it from the outside. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a flashlight, and took 1 step closer. Who's there? No answer. Another knock, then a whisper, muffled through the wood. You forgot to draw the ending. I backed away, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The doorknob started to turn, once, twice, then stopped. Silence. Then, from behind me, paper sliding under, the door again. I turned, another red envelope, name written in ink that hadn't dried. Yet Reed Taylor, the R still bleeding down the page. I didn't pick it up, didn't have to, because even from where I stood, I could see what was drawn inside it. It was me, standing at the front door, and behind me, in the reflection of the window, Caleb, smiling. I didn't open the door that night. I couldn't. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at that red envelope on the floor, waiting for something else to happen. A second knock, a voice, anything, but there was nothing. The air in my house grew thick, heavy, like standing underwater. Every sound felt muffled. My breathing was too loud. The shadows along the wall were too long. When I finally blinked, the envelope was gone. Just gone. In its place was a single sheet of paper, flat against the floor with no folds or creases, as if it had always been there. Across the top, written in perfect black ink, Chapter 4, the author opens the door, and beneath that, a drawing of me not dead, not screaming, just standing there, staring out into something endless, like I'd already opened it. I didn't sleep. By morning, my phone had 11 missed calls. Claire. When I called back, she answered on the first ring, voice raw and shaking. He's gone. My stomach dropped. What do you mean gone? Caleb, I put him to bed last night and he's gone, Reed. The window was open. His shoes are still here, but he's gone. Did you call the police? They're here, she said between sobs. They're saying he ran away, but you and I both know that's not what happened. I didn't answer because I did know the thing didn't need him anymore. It had moved on. I tried to tell myself I wasn't next, that maybe I'd broken whatever cycle had started with those drawings, but the house disagreed. Every time I walked past a mirror or window, the reflections lagged a half-second behind, just enough to notice. When I looked too long, I could see faint movement, like figures shifting in the dark corners of the glass. And that night, when I turned off the lights to go to bed, something scratched beneath my pillow. I reached under and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, another drawing, my bed, me in it, and a dark figure crouched beside me, holding a pencil to my throat. I threw it across the room, heart racing. The paper hit the wall and stuck there, not pinned, stuck. When I walked closer, I saw why. The drawing had grown hands. Thin, sketched hands pressed flat against the wallpaper, the fingers twitching faintly as if trying to pull themselves free. The graphite smeared under my breath, but when I reached out, my fingertips met something real. It was cold, alive. I ripped the paper down and threw it into the sink, setting it on fire with the lighter I used for candles. It burned fast. Too fast, like it had been waiting for air. The flames flared white for a second before dying completely, leaving behind a perfect black circle of ash, and within it, drawn in smoke against the porcelain sink, you can't burn what's already drawn. I ran, not to the police, not to Claire. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay. Every step I took away from the house felt heavier, like the street was holding on to me. When I looked back, I could have sworn the windows were following me, eyes glowing faintly behind the glass. By the time I reached the end of the block, I saw him, Caleb, standing barefoot at the corner. His pajamas were soaked, his hair plastered to his face, but his eyes were empty white, no pupils, no color. He was holding his notebook, the same one filled with drawings. Caleb! I called out. Jesus, where have you been? He didn't answer. He just opened the notebook and showed me the page. The drawing showed both of us standing in the middle of the street. Behind us, a massive shadow towered, its body made of hundreds of hands, faces and torn paper, and above it written in large, jagged letters. The final drawing. I took a step back. "Caleb, we can stop this!" He looked up, and when he spoke, it wasn't his voice anymore. "It's already finished." The streetlights flickered and went out. Every bulb on the block burst at once. Glass raining down. The world fell into blackness. The only thing I could see was the notebook, glowing faintly in his hands. Page after page began to flip on their own, faster and faster until the last one slammed open. It showed my house, and through the windows, the two of us, drawn small and terrified, standing exactly where we were now. Then across the bottom, new words appeared, written as I watched, and then they looked up. I looked up. I shouldn't have. The sky wasn't the sky anymore. It was paper, a massive sheet stretching endlessly above, ink bleeding through it in thick black waves, and from the tears in the paper, something was coming through, hands, thousands of them, sketches of hands, ripping the sky apart like thin fabric. Caleb smiled. "It likes the way you look when you're scared," he whispered. I grabbed the notebook and tore it from his grip. It screamed. Not him. The book. The sound of ripping paper filled the air as every page curled, blackened and burned from the inside out. The light vanished, and suddenly, we were back on the street, the sky normal, the noise gone. But Caleb wasn't standing anymore. He was lying on the asphalt. Still, the notebook beside him, blank. I called for help. The sirens came fast. The EMTs checked him. Pulse, breathing, nothing. Claire showed up seconds later. When she saw her son, she didn't scream. She just knelt down, took his hand, and whispered, "It picked someone else." I didn't understand what she meant until I got home that night. There was another red envelope waiting on my porch. My name written in ink that hadn't dried yet. But this time, the handwriting wasn't Caleb's, it was mine, and the words inside weren't drawn. They were written. Chapter 5. The author draws the end. For hours, I just stared at that red envelope. It sat in the center of my coffee table, bleeding faint ink into the wood, as if it had been soaking there for years. The words Chapter 5 shimmered faintly in the lamplight, letters that didn't seem written so much as groan, pulsing softly like veins under skin. I told myself I wouldn't open it, that this was it, the line I wouldn't cross. But the longer I stared, the louder the scratching became. It wasn't coming from the envelope itself. It was coming from inside my head, like something small was clawing its way through my skull, desperate to get out. And I realized it wasn't trying to escape. It was trying to remind me how this story started. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, syncing perfectly with my pulse. "Open it. Open it. Open it!" I finally snapped. I tore it open. Inside wasn't paper this time. It was something thin, a translucent film folded like parchment. It shimmered in the light, almost oily, colors shifting under its surface like gasoline on water. I held it up. It wasn't a drawing. It was skin, human skin, and drawn on it, in faint graphite lines, was the rough outline of a man sitting at a desk, his head bent low, writing. It was me, and below it, in small letters that seemed to move when I blinked, "You're almost finished." I dropped it, stumbling backward. My breath came fast, shallow, the room tilting at impossible angles. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out. The entire house went black. I fumbled for my phone, but before I could reach it, something lit up across the room, the notebook, the same black one that had belonged to Caleb. It was sitting on the desk now, open to a new page. Words appeared on their own, forming in precise, even strokes. He reads what he has written. He sees what cannot be unwritten. He understands. My shaking hand reached for the page, turning it. The next one was blank, except for one sentence in the middle, written in my handwriting. It's not drawing him anymore. It's drawing through him. I heard movement then, from the walls, from inside them. Slow, rhythmic scratching, thousands of tiny hands tracing words under the wallpaper. When I pressed my ear against the wall, I heard whispering, not words, names, my name, over and over again. Read, 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 until another voice cut through them all, a child's voice, clear and close, Caleb's. "You're doing it wrong." I froze. Caleb? You can't end it like this. Where are you? Behind you. I turned. He was standing in the doorway, but it wasn't him. His face was pale, the skin too thin, almost translucent. His eyes were black, his mouth too wide. His hands dripped ink that hissed when it hit the floor, and in one hand, he held a pencil, not a normal one. The wood was blackened and pulsing faintly, like something alive was coiled inside it. He stepped closer, dragging the tip of the pencil along the wall as he moved, leaving behind words that glowed faintly. "If you won't finish it," he said softly, "it will." I backed away until I hit the desk. "Caleb, listen to me. It's over. You're safe now. I'm not Caleb," he whispered. He raised the pencil. "You made me when you changed the story." I swallowed hard. "I didn't make you," he smiled, ink dripping from his teeth. "You did when you drew yourself alive. You rewrote the rules. And now it needs a new ending." He pressed the pencil to his own chest, and I heard the sound of paper tearing. The line he drew ran down his sternum, splitting him open. Not blood, not flesh, just pages, thousands of pages fluttering out of him, each covered in drawings, my house, my street, every second of my life replayed frame by frame. "Every story ends with someone dying," he said softly. "It just doesn't have to be me." The walls around me began to move. The wallpaper peeled back, revealing more paper underneath. Drawings, layers upon layers of them. Hundreds deep, each depicting me, writing, running, screaming. Some were still wet, some moved. One showed me turning toward the wall, and when I looked closer, I saw myself looking back out. The room began to spin. The papers flapped like wings, the air thick with ink and dust. I could feel the story closing around me, every line I'd ever written tightening like a noose, and over the roar, one final whisper. Endings only hurt when you fight them. The desk shook violently, the notebook snapped shut, and I realized what I had to do. If it was drawing through me, if I was the pen, then maybe I could write it shut. Trap it. I grabbed the nearest pen, forced my hand onto the notebook, and began writing. The words poured out of me, unstoppable, furious, desperate. He writes the walls closed. He seals the paper shut. He locks the story in itself. The house screamed, every window shattering, every bulb bursting, black ink flooding from the cracks in the ceiling. The floor trembled. Caleb, or what was left of him, began to unravel, his body turning into torn pages that burned midair. He reached for me one last time, voice warping into something ancient and wrong. "You can't erase me." I kept writing. "I can end you." The ink exploded. Out of the walls. The paper burst into flame, and everything went white. When I woke up, I was lying in the street outside my house. The house itself was gone, not burned. Not destroyed, just gone. In its place was a blackened square of earth, perfectly clean, as if nothing had ever stood there. The air smelled faintly of ash and graphite. In my hand was a single page. Blank. Except for one sentence typed across the center. Chapter 6. The author finishes the story. I stared at it until the ink began to move again. New words forming beneath the line. In handwriting that looked just like mine, "He thinks it's over. It never is." And below that, in smaller text, Caleb's handwriting this time. "Thank you for finishing it for me." I dropped the page and walked away, but the sound of scratching followed me. Faint, constant, coming from my pocket. When I reached in, there was a pencil there, black, pulsing faintly, alive, waiting. Final message. Some stories don't end when you stop writing them. They end when someone else picks up the pen, and if you ever find a red envelope on your doorstep, don't open it. The end.